Good afternoon guys, welcome back to Maverick Baking and welcome back to another recipe video. Now today's one is a little bit of a kind of quarantine special edition in that I couldn't find some of the ingredients I actually needed for this recipe. But today I'm going to be showing you how to make a kind of fairly customizable Maverick Baking style salted caramel brownie. Let's go. Okay, when I say these brownies are Maverick style, I really mean it. Ingredients are kind of hard to come by in any shops just now, at least where I live, because of social distancing and lockdown situations. So we're kind of improvising with a few things today, but guess what? It's still gonna be delicious. So the first thing we need to do is we need to melt together some chocolate and some butter, both of which have proven to be fairly easy ingredients to get so far. So we're going to need, as always, as any good recipe begins with, a big ass bowl. We're gonna fill this with roughly pretty much equal weights of butter and chocolate. We're gonna melt them together until they're all nice and familiar with each other and nice and smooth and delicious looking. And yeah, then we're gonna do some other stuff. So let's do that first. So the butter I'm using is just standard unsalted butter. You can use salted butter, but because of the salt content in the salted caramel later on and the kind of salt we're going to sprinkle on top, you don't really need any more salt unless you love salt, in which case you do you, honey. And the chocolate I'm going to be using today is the one that I tend to use quite a lot at home. It's from Calabao. This is a Belgian company. It's very easy to get hold of. It's not obviously of the kind of super highest quality or anything, but it gives a fairly decent taste. It's handy to have in baking because it comes in huge bulk sizes, and like I said, it's very easy to get hold of typically. You can find it in kind of bulk stores like your Macro, your Costco kind of places, and you can find it on Amazon. I will drop the link for it below if you want to get some. Plus, who would say no to having 2.5 kilos of chocolate in their house at any one time? So we're going to add this to the butter. Okay, so we have our butter, which I've just cut into kind of rough pieces just to help it melt a bit quicker because I have no patience. And we have our chocolate in here. Now you can really use any kind of milk or dark chocolate you like. Obviously, the more milky the chocolate, the kind of more sweet these brownies will be, and the darker the chocolate, the more rich and dark they will be. Obviously. I like to use between kind of 40 and 60% in baking. I find milk chocolate that's around 30% is sometimes just a bit too milky, and anything above 70 can sometimes get very kind of grown up and bittersweet, which I like, but not everyone is into. And believe it or not, I'm not going to eat this whole tray of brownies by myself. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this bowl of butter and chocolate bits over this little pan of simmering water I have just behind me. Now the water isn't boiling, the water isn't even bubbling, it's just steaming, and we're going to use that gentle heat to let these melt together and stir it into a lovely smooth chocolatey stuff. While that is melting, we're going to get our other ingredients ready, and we're going to start with the dry stuff, which is simply flour and cocoa powder. Now I know just as well as all of you that flour is pretty hard to find just now. It's hard to find bread flour, plain flour, self-raising, which probably means that there are more people have been buying it to bake with, which is fantastic news, and thank you for doing so. Baking is a fantastic and delicious hobby to have, but it also means that you have to improvise a bit when you can't find it. So today I'm actually making these salted caramel brownies with pasta flour. Now this isn't a huge deal because pasta flour or 00 flour is basically just a very, very, very fine wheat flour. It's fairly similar to plain flour. It's just been milled and milled and milled until it's really, really super fine. Almost like the texture of corn flour or icing sugar, that really sort of almost dusty texture rather than that kind of thick, lumpy flour texture. This recipe only uses 65 grams of flour, so even if you're finding any kind of flour hard to come by, it won't take up much of it. Okay, so we have our dry ingredients in here. These are just equal weights, pretty much, of our pasta flour, sorry Italy, and our cocoa powder. Now we don't need to give this any sort of major mix, obviously, because the ingredients are dry, but it just helps things come together quicker at the end if we give this a stir together now. So there you have it, our dry ingredients roughly stirred together, and we just have it to hand when we need it to mix it. Now our last bowl, and I promise this is our last bowl, is going to be another big ass bowl. And in here we're going to put our eggs and our sugar. Sugar-wise, for this recipe, I would normally recommend using castor sugar. I would normally recommend using castor sugar for most baking recipes anyway, to be honest. Caster sugar is essentially just a kind of more finely milled version of this, which makes it easier for the sugar to dissolve. Similarly, I would also recommend using brown sugar, but guess what? I can't find either of those, so today we're going with regular granulated sugar, which is the kind that you stir into your tea. And it will work, it just means a little bit more whisking on my part. And similarly, there are only 3 eggs needed for this recipe, so you don't need to worry about the kind of egg rations that we're all having to go through just now. So what we're going to do is we're going to crack the eggs and pour the sugar into that bowl, and we're just going to whisk them. We're not going to kind of beat them to get any air in, because we don't want air in our brownies. We want them to be nice and velvety and dense and rich. We basically just want to be able to dissolve the sugar into the egg yolks, which will then help it dissolve completely when baked. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we have our eggs and our sugar in our big ass bowl, so I'm going to take my big ass balloon whisk and just help them get friendly with each other. At this point, I would usually recommend to people to add in any kind of flavourings they want to the brownie. So for example, if you wanted to add some vanilla extract, or if you wanted to add some booze, if you wanted to add a little bit of a liqueur, even some mint flavouring or some orange zest, anything like that. This is usually the stage I would ask people to do it. But guess what? I couldn't find any vanilla extract in the shop. Basically all we're doing is just making sure the egg yolks and the egg whites are combined and that the sugar is going to dissolve kind of nicely. Okay, so this is our final kind of set of ingredients that we've mixed together, so let's set them aside. I'll clear away this stuff from your line of vision and we'll check up on our melting mixture. Okie dokie, our chocolate and butter mixture is now exactly where we want it to be. It should be shiny, there shouldn't be any little lumps of chocolate, there shouldn't be any little lumps of butter. You also shouldn't see any kind of graininess where it's split. You should just see a beautiful bath of molten chocolate deliciousness that you just want to stick your entire head into. But we're not going to do that, I promise. Not in public, at least. We are going to pour this chocolate and butter mixture into our egg and sugar mixture, whisking all the time. We want to keep whisking because we want to make sure that any kind of heat that's contained in this bowl won't scramble our eggs. So you don't really have to do this super quickly or super precisely. You just want to drizzle your chocolate mixture in while you are whisking. You can even enjoy how my bowl spins as I do it. So at this point, it should still look lovely and smooth, but it should start to look a bit more like brownie batter. It should start to have that sort of resistance. So it still drizzles kind of nice and smoothly, but it's got almost that thickness to it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to whisk our flour and our cocoa powder mixture into this until we have a gorgeous proper brownie batter. As always, there's no fancy way of doing this, we're just going to tip it all in at once. No need to be delicate. So you can mix this until it is smooth. Now it doesn't matter too much how vigorous you are with this. Normally with a cake mixture, obviously I would tell you to mix it as little as possible because you don't want it to be chewy. But as this mixture has very little flour in it and thus very little chance for any kind of chewy, stringy gluten to develop, it's not really a big deal. We now have an amazing, thick, ooey, gooey, dripping, thick chocolate brownie batter that honestly, you could probably bottle this and sell it, but I'm not going to. We're going to bake it. So what I'm going to do is this little kind of 8x8 square baking tin you see behind you, I'm going to grease that, I'm going to line it, I'm going to get this in and finish these off. To grease my tins, I always use a baking spray. Now this stuff is basically kind of like an oil aerosol. It just makes it a lot easier for getting into those little cracks and crevices and saves you from rubbing butter or margarine or oil into things. Great for lazy people like me. Again, if you would like to make your life easier, I will drop a link in the description box below as to where you can find this. Also going to add a little roughly ripped square of greaseproof paper just to stop it from kind of getting stuck to the bottom of the tin. So dishes aside, we are just pouring our gorgeous thick brownie batter into the tin. So we just want to smooth it out a little bit, and now we're going to get our salted caramel in. Not before licking the spoon though. And the whisk. So we have our brownie batter in the tin here. What we're now going to do is we're going to take this gorgeous salted caramel. We're going to take big kind of spoonful globs of it, and just dollop it all over the mixture. Then we're going to use just the edge of a knife or the back of a spoon to just kind of swirl it through. So you don't want huge lumps, you want it to be fairly kind of mixed through without mixing it all in and getting lost in the batter. Let's do it. This is a homemade jar of salted caramel, as in the caramel's homemade, I didn't make the jar. I'm not that good. I will have the recipe for that in the description box below, but I would also completely allow any shot-bought salted caramel or just some shot-bought caramel that you sprinkle some salt into. However you want to do it, however you can do it, please feel free. But this caramel recipe is only 4 ingredients. It takes like 10-15 minutes and it is, yeah, it's amazing. So it's kind of runny and soft without being too liquid. You know, it's great. It's great for drizzling. If you prefer the caramel to be more set, you can keep it in the fridge. I like to keep it out at room temperature. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. But you could also warm this through to make it even runnier. It's your preference, really. So we're just going to dollop this caramel all over that brownie batter. So I would say I've used about half of the quantity that this recipe for salted caramel will make. This is fantastic news in my opinion, because it means that you have some that you can keep to drizzle over ice cream, to stir into your porridge in the morning, to have on toast, to eat with a spoon if you're having one of those kind of days, which many of us are at the moment. So our caramel is effectively dolloped. You can see it's all over the place. This is because we want to make sure that everyone who has a bite of these brownies gets a taste of that salted caramel, because there's nothing worse than when, you know, you're eating something and the flavor isn't fully throughout the whole thing. It's just not fair. So we're just using the back of this teaspoon or the tip of a knife, as I said, to swirl that gorgeous caramel all throughout here, by which point it should look something like this. Now at this point, usually I would tell you to grab your high quality flaky sea salt, because it would add a gorgeous finish to this brownies. You know what I'm gonna say? I couldn't find any because the shops are shy of everything, so I'm just using classic table salt. So we're just going to pour out just a little kind of pinch, and we're going to sprinkle that over the top of our brownies just to add that finishing kind of sweet, salty flavor, and then we're gonna get them in the oven. So just a little kind of Jamie Oliver flourish here to get that salt on. At this point, you can even add some peanuts, some pretzels, anything you like. I'm going to add a little bit of chocolate, just literally a handful of these chocolate chips. I'm just going to kind of throw and scatter them on top. And then guess what? We're going to take these brownies, bake them in an oven preheated at 140 degrees Celsius. I'll put the full measurements and everything in the description below. And we're going to bake these for about 45 to 55 minutes. You want to bake them at this low, slow temperature so that they can just set. We don't want them to be crispy on the outside. We don't want them to be overcooked. We want them to be velvety soft the whole way through. Let's get them in the oven. See you in 45 minutes. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. A few hours have passed. Our brownies have finished baking, they've finished cooling, and I have finished slicing, and this is the end result. Now, obviously that tray made more than 4 1/4, but a couple have been eaten and a few have been gifted via contact-free delivery to a family member. So we only have a few left, but they are looking sexy as expected. So the brownies do take a little bit of time to cool. You just want to make sure that they are obviously kind of sturdy enough to slice, that it won't just become a big gooey mess, but eventually you do get nice kind of squares or bars out of these. I'm really feeling the bar vibe with these ones. I don't really know why, I just think they look kind of pretty. On top, our lovely swirls of that golden salted caramel, which has turned into a slightly thicker substance just from the heat of the oven, but it hasn't turned into anything like rock solid. It's just a nice kind of softer, less runny caramel. We also have our chocolate chips that I sprinkled on top, and you can see that the texture of that brownie is just to die for. Velvety, soft, rich, fudgy, nothing cakey, nothing crispy, and it's the same the whole way through. Nothing overbaked on the bottom and the top, no dry edges, just consistent loveliness. But of course, I'm sure you're all interested in the taste, so I will take a bite of this one that I may definitely have already tasted. And let me tell you how this is. Just look at this soft, fudgy inside. That caramel is actually surprisingly not as sweet as you would think, because I decided to use quite a kind of darker chocolate in these brownies. The sweetness of the caramel does balance out really well. You get that little kind of prickle of salt that comes through just to lift everything and make everything even bolder. It's just so, so good, so, so rich. Obviously, if you're not a fan of chocolate, these probably aren't for you because they are super, super rich, but to me, a brownie shouldn't be any other way. Super conscious I have chocolate in my teeth now. Of course, as always, I will have a full recipe in the description box below for these. I hope you guys, if you are baking just now, that you have better luck than me with finding ingredients. As always, if you haven't watched my recent kind of back to basics videos and seen even more of the back to basics recipes I have on my blog, maverickbaking.com, do go and check those out if you're a beginner baker. If you are a little bit more kind of confident and advanced in the kitchen, there are always hundreds more recipes on my site for you to check out, so please do. If you guys would like more recipes like this, even if they are a little bit fully maverick, make it up as you go along with the ingredients style, let me know in the comments below. As always, I really, really appreciate you guys being here, and I seriously hope that you're all staying as safe and as healthy as you can, and that you're all staying indoors as much as possible as well. Now, I'm off to go and finish this brownie. Thank you so, so much for being here as always, and I will see you for the next one.